about House Speaker Dean Plocker. You've heard it from some left-wing websites. You've heard it from disgruntled staffers. Now, let me just jump right in and bring in the Speaker of the Missouri House of Representatives, Dean Plocker. Mr.
Great to
Speaker,
be on,
welcome to the
Scott.
show.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Let's just jump right in here. I know you got a limited amount of time, but it seems like the controversy started when you were looking at upgrading essentially how members, if a person from Sedalia calls Brad Pollitt, says they got a problem with DNR, they track that and try to get back to them, answer their questions, follow up with them. The software system to do that you thought needed an upgrade, right?
Well, over the years, many members, former reps, former speakers, in fact, have suggested that it needed upgrading. This most recent time that it happened, I referred it to the Administration and Accounts Committee, which was the right committee to refer it to, and let them decide.
So, to me, when you read something, I don't care who you are. I don't care what news you're watching. You watch this show, you're going to get a filter of certain biases. It seemed like this started off as like some sort of controversy. And I'm like, just my own white trash hillbilly observation. I mean, there's nothing wrong with discussing whether you could upgrade that system, right? I mean, there's nothing inherently wrong about that.
Not inherently whatsoever. In fact, I followed the correct process, the process and the role of the speaker. I referred it to the right committee for a transparent hearing so that the members can decide. And that's what this House is all about, for the members to decide what's best for the state.
I've actually worked in the House. A lot of folks watching this are familiar with the House processes. It seems like the chief clerk of the House had a role in this. Typically, when you're looking at something like this, what is the role of the chief clerk?
Well, in this particular case, I would say that it's advisory.
Yeah. So this is where to me, this is just my own hillbilly horse sense, kind of looking into a situation. And maybe the first time I smelled something might be up is it seemed like right in the first of this, the Missouri Independent got involved. And I'll just tell you, word here on High Street. I mean, obviously, look, I don't have a beef with Independent does, but let's be candid. They are funded by left-wing interest groups to put out left-wing news, and you're not left-wing, so you're the problem. It seemed like right away they were tipped off. And let me just ask you, do you believe the Missouri Independent, the Democrat left-wing news operation, was tipped off by a member of your staff about this situation to make it look controversial?
I think, Scott, I'd love to know exactly. I don't know if I'll ever know. But what I do know is the one fact that this happened. I turned the reimbursement check in. Okay, I turned it into administration.
Hold on. We're talking about the constituent management thing.
Oh.
It seemed like right away when this constituent management thing came up, there were all these off-the-record sources, which, look, if you're going to do a lot of journalism, you're going to get some off-the-record sources. It seemed like right away the Independent was right in the middle of whether you should upgrade this, casting it as some nefarious thing you were doing. Do you think that somebody on the House staff worked with the Democrats to have a politically hurtful news story about this contact management software?
I think there's some unique circumstantial evidence that will hopefully reveal itself over due time, but there's a lot of commonality with what's going on, as I'm repeatedly attacked by the same George Soros funded media that's incredibly biased and really not telling the whole story.
Well, let me just ask you this. I mean, I could tell you what folks are saying at Grand Cafe or Coffee Zone, but the gist of it is that, frankly, some staff have, like we all have, some folks we're more friends with than others. Let me just ask you the question. If this contact management software company had retained a different lobbyist, do you think that some members of your staff would have been as quick to run to the Independent and make this seem nefarious?
I don't know, but what's weird is that.
Well, I'll just tell you, I don't think they would have.
Yeah, it's circumstantial, and I think sometimes when it continues to be so circumstantial, it smells funny, is what it is.
Well, it's also I don't think the Independent was pulled out of a hat. I mean, they didn't call Brandon Rather, right? They called the Independent, right? So I mean, it kind of is what it kind of is. They knew what I think they knew what they were doing. But now let me just ask you this: after seeing some of the stuff you've seen, Governor Parson tried to come out and warn folks about the Independent.
He did.
Looking back, we're all geniuses. Looking back 50-50, it's like an opinion from 10 beers ago. It's always a little sharper, right? Or a little 10 beers later. Do you think you should have maybe listened to Governor Parson when he gives the warnings first about this political operation the Missouri Independent is?
I clearly do. In fact, I sent a letter to the caucus outlining my concerns for this anything but independent group. I actually called Governor Parson and apologized for not heeding his advice more sternly. And I suggest everybody else do as well. Learning from example.
So let me ask this. Ultimately, the accounts committee, headed by Dale Wright, a lead belt guy, a good old boy, they decided for whatever reason they weren't going to go forward and buy this software. I mean, I assume you probably disagree, but I mean, are you comfortable with that being the last word on it?
Absolutely. In fact, Scott, I never formed an opinion one way or the other over this constituent management. I sent it to committee, let the committee hear the good, the bad, and the ugly, figure it out. They did their job. They had their hearing. It's, that's the role of the process that the House of Representatives is supposed to use when vetting what we are doing for the state of Missouri.
By the way, I got to thank my buddy Chip from Lake St. Louis. He tells me that's a town that's not St. Louis. I just think he's delusional, but I appreciate this. He lives a lake life, which that lake is kind of like we'd call that a big pond back home, but I appreciate the Stein. So I heard the FBI was looking into this, and listen, I almost I hear probably twice a day somebody tells me the FBI is investigating something. So I'm just a skeptical hillbilly. I just kind of don't always buy into when people say that, but I read this, and I read it enough places that I thought, okay, so I know some of the doormen, good fellas. I asked, was there any boy you didn't know? No. I asked some members of the committee, hey, was there somebody here you didn't see that might have been from the FBI? I mean, FBI guys that I know look like FBI guys. They look like you. They're very fit. They're always wearing a suit. They look pretty official. They don't look like me. They don't look like Kelton. So I asked around, did anybody see anybody in that room that wasn't that you didn't know? Not one person I could find said they saw somebody they didn't know. I guess the question, and maybe I've got my opinion is this was just some propaganda made up to feed to the independent. Am I wrong?
I believe it's the oldest trick in the book to assert that the FBI is involved in something, because anytime you call the FBI, they will neither confirm nor deny.
And I don't want to act like I know they weren't there. I don't want to act like I know they're not investigating anything. They could be investigating anyone anytime for all I know. They could be investigating Kelton's illegal gambling racket that he set up. And if the FBI is watching, it was all Kelton's idea. It was all his fault. I'd like to be one of Trump's lawyers, not Trump. But it just seems to me like, we'd call it bullshit back home.
Sorry about that. We're getting, I got a call coming in. I didn't mute that.
So anyhow, let me ask you this. I saw you come in hard on one thing last year. It was IP reform. Yes. And for those of you, we may have a little bigger audience today. It's called initiative petition reform. It's where if the legislature won't do something, they go get signatures and they put it on the ballot and the people vote. Been very successful for a lot of progressive or more liberal causes. And look, you know me, if the folks want something, I think the folks already get what they want. You have been very stringent about changing this. The same people that fund the independent are East Coast, very liberal groups. The same people that fund these IP reform changes are East Coast, very liberal groups. Do you think you're being targeted by them because you're trying to change their honey hole?
Circumstances would clearly indicate. I mean, I've advocated for our constitutional IP reform now for 6 years. It needs to be addressed. The voters need to be aware of what's on there. There needs to be transparency. I've always advocated for transparency. Be forthright about it. Let us know what you're doing to our Constitution. I think it's more than circumstantial evidence that this George Soros-funded left-wing group has been haunting me now for a long time, and I believe certainly will continue to do so. It's, I'm a target when you believe in good policy. When you're standing up for something, sometimes people shoot at you, and that's what's happening.
Well, I mean, I guess good policy is always in the eye of the beholder, but it does feel like that when the independent goes after you, then the Post and the Star, they're kind of just, they're not what they used to be. They grab on and follow suit and here and so. And before you know it, the members of the opposition party are kind of taking their cue. And it is a bit of a snowball. And look, sometimes I don't think the independent lies. I just think they're going to take something like, should you figure out how Brad Pollock can call that old boy in Sedalia back easier or not, into something bad. I don't accuse them of lying. I don't frankly think they do. I think the way they couch things is the old bias that started back in the days of Dan Rather and has just gotten bigger. Let me just ask you this. You've had some staff change. There's been some talk of a shakeup in the organization of the office. Did that have anything to do with this contact management software? Oh, we might have lost him here. Maybe Mr. Soros logged in. Some people say
Yeah, you wonder, don't you?
some
I
people
see.
say I knew George Soros. I used to tell him to do that because I'm a Republican, so I like rich people. I used to try to foster that for my street cred, but I can't believe he tried to take out my broadcast here, son of a gun.
Well, a lot of this is in hindsight. You look at this hit, but I do believe the leftist liberal media has an agenda. They're selling
Sure.
that. They don't tell the story entirety. They use innuendos and facades to push their agenda. It's happening to all of us. I'm not the only one. I'm just happen to be in the spotlight right now.
Look, you've had some staff shakeup. There's been some discussion of rearranging some of the organization in the office. Did that have anything to do with this contact management software situation?
Not whatsoever. This has been an ongoing discussion within my office on how I was going to handle it. The timing perhaps was not the best, but not at all.
Let me ask you this. So, if anybody's read anything, folks have been discussing about uh, some expenses that you had, whether they were paid for by your campaign, by the state. It is, I even think to most observers of government, a touch confusing how that all works. We've read the liberals' version of what happened. Just tell folks in your own words what happened with this situation.
Well, I released a statement to the caucus because I think it's worthy of explaining, and I did. We staff, there were some errors made, right? We found the errors. We self-reported. We corrected. We made the reimbursements. I think that's the honest, correct thing to do. Should this have happened? No. And it's embarrassing. It's a checkbook error, but there's a lot of accounts bouncing around. It's quite tedious. I caught it, and I'm grateful that I caught it. I own it. The buck has to stop with me. We reimbursed. Enough said.
So here's the part I hear every so often. Folks on the Capitol bend my ear, and I'm damn grateful for it. But I heard not long after you found this or cut a check or whatever you did, and what we're talking a few $1,000s here, right?
Yes.
You were contacted by the Independent. Almost how long was it before the Democrats contacted you after you had turned your reimbursement in?
Well, it's one of those suspicious circumstances again. I can tell you what I know. I wrote the check. As I started to say earlier, I turned it in to House Accounts, and within about an hour, I received an email from the Independent telling me they were going to do an article on that.
So, I mean, I'm somewhat familiar with sunshine laws. I like to think I have a good relationship with the legislature. I've never complained it's taken too long, but boy, an hour, you're just damn lucky, right? There's no. I'll just tell you. Let's just talk hogs, dogs, and logs here. We've known each other a long time. Do you believe that a current or former staffer for the House, after you turn that check in, immediately just notified the Democrats to hurt
All
you
I'm able to
politically?
comment on here is what I did because I know that to be the facts. The facts were I cut a check to reimburse the House, which was the right thing to do, and I turned it in. Period. Within an hour and a half, I got an email from the Independent. That's what I know.
We'd call that back home fishy. Uh, so anyhow, let me just ask you this. I've been around the House. I filled out some expense reports when I worked there. Gosh, you can tell by the gray and the hair, something you don't have yet, which is very concerning to me and kind of pisses me off. But it's been a long time ago, but I turned in some House reports. Other members have contacted me since and said, "Oh, this is awful. He's a dirtbag." Others have said, "Hell, I've had trouble with this before. I've had to do things." Now they don't have the amount of different accounts a speaker does, but I mean, it's not totally foreign for somebody to have an issue and have to correct their House expense reports, is there?
Not that I'm aware of. And you don't know what it's like to file these reports until you walk in someone's shoes that do. But as a public official, it's my duty, I believe, to check my work. And I did that. I did the right thing. I think that's what, and I was transparent about it. And I believe in that. That's what you should expect of me.
I would assume there'll be others looking at their reports right now. Give them some advice. I would think everybody's now thinking, "Oh man, I better go back and make sure every jot and tittle's correct," especially if you're a Republican, I assume.
I would. You learn from me, right? I went back and found a mistake, found a couple, corrected it. Do what you need to do. That's the right thing to do.
So the next part of this story was there's a House Ethics Committee meeting on Friday. Why are they meeting?
I'm not able to comment on what the ethics committee is doing. It's not the right thing to do. The ethics committee was appointed. They have a duty. They have a job. I trust that they take it seriously, and I trust that they're going to come to the conclusions that they come with in the proper way.
Okay, well, I have an email here. It's addressed to you, dated Friday, October 20th at 3:36 p.m. It is from the chief clerk. It says, please be advised, pursuant to the Missouri House of Representatives Ethics Rules Procedure for the 102nd General Assembly and the Rules Procedure of the United States House of Representatives Committee on the Ethics of 118th Congress, I've requested an advisory opinion from the Missouri House Committee on Ethics on my proposed response to your inquiry of October 17th, 2023. If you'll give me a moment. This was a sunshine request that was done promptly, I will say. But I did file for things I knew was there, and it came back. I thought the House staff was very quick. But essentially, the emails that my sunshine request returned said you'd let someone go, and the clerk wanted to continue to pay them. That is number one. It would strike me as odd. Now, maybe there are procedures I don't know about that. If a member lets a staff person go or that person leaves, the clerk wouldn't have a reason to pay them for work they're not doing. But number two, I guess I wasn't aware that the House clerk could go to the ethics committee and convene a hearing and get advisory opinions. Is that typical?
What I'm going to comment on is what I spoke of earlier. The House Ethics Committee is an important committee. It has its procedures and policies. I believe they're going to draw conclusions as they are required.
But can you confirm that the email that I read to you was an email you received? It was through a sunshine request to the House of Representatives. Can you confirm that email was sent and that the chief clerk asked for this House Ethics Committee to be convened?
I do not want to get involved in this. I will concede that I received emails.
So, have you ever heard of a thing called the Missouri News Horizon?
No.
Do you know why you've never heard of the Missouri News Horizon?
Well, why is that?
Well, I'll tell you now. There is news coverage of this. There's a couple stories. The Missouri News Horizon was an entity convened by some conservative donors in much the same way the Missouri Independent's conceived by liberal donors. It was before you got here. I want to say it was around 2011, 2012, 2013. They produced conservative news content that they put out to mostly radio stations to try to get them to put out a conservative message, similar to the Independent. But they were actually kicked out of this ridiculous press association thing because they didn't disclose their funders. Did you know that?
No, I did not.
Well, I guess to me, it's an odd thing that if one group was kicked out for being too Republican, but other groups unabashedly Democratic, liberal, but they're fine with that. It almost makes me think that the media is liberal, so they're fine with liberals. But if you're conservative and you're doing the exact same thing, well, we can't have that. Am I wrong?
Well, it seems there's a double standard.
Well, let me ask you this then. So the state of Missouri at gunpoint will take your money, right? Or your property, or they'll fleece you, right? They'll hold you up down off of a balcony and shake you down for money. Then they take those tax dollars and they provide a left-wing group parking space, office space, free research and document production that frankly you wouldn't provide to a member of the general public, and you wouldn't provide to a conservative outlet for sure. I mean, can you justify to Republican voters why this double standard exists?
No, it's the first I've heard of it, but I have done research into this Soros-funded media hit scam, and I know they have dark money. I don't know where it comes from entirely. It's dark. It's suspicious, and I think we need to do further investigation into that as well. There shouldn't be a double standard.
I'm going to send you the story of the Missouri News. Well, and when I say I mean Kelton will probably actually do the real adult work of doing it. He'll send you the Missouri News Horizon, and it'll be interesting to me to see. I've always just wondered, and again, I don't have a problem with what the News Horizon did. They were, I mean, if you cared to know, you knew what they were, right? If you care what the Independent know, you know what they are. But they were treated extremely differently. And the only thing I can tell is it's because one was conservative and one was very liberal. I wonder if that's something that members can justify their constituents to take public resources. I mean, what could you rent out an office in the Capitol for? My God, to take public resources and let them be divvied up in such a demonstrably unfair way. And I think Governor Parson tried to bring this up too. And when I say I, of course, I mean Kelton, because it'll actually get done. We'll send you that. Let me just ask you this final question here. I want to thank our folks at the Courtyard by Marriott, which is the only place to stay in Jeff City, and the folks at United Fiber. Actually, there's the money you've put out, Speaker Plocker, for rural broadband. If you want to see how that money is used and used very, very, very well, go up to Savannah, United Fiber. They know how to do it. Let me just ask you the question I think folks really want to know. We saved it for last. I saw a freshman representative from Northwest Missouri came out and said you should step down. I'm sure that there's a lot of Democrats and liberals that think you should step down, which is par for the course. Are you, under any circumstances, as of right now, having any discussions about resigning your position as Speaker of the Missouri House of Representatives?
Absolutely not. I look forward to leading the House to produce good conservative legislation such as property tax cuts, personal property tax reform. There's a lot of good things to do. I'm not going to let this liberal distraction from George Soros remove me from doing a good job for the people.
And can we get rid of the DH?
Yeah, I advocated that all the time. I'm a purist in baseball.
Mr. Speaker, you said we had 20 minutes. I appreciate the time.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it, Scott. Have a good day.
Thank you. That was Missouri Speaker of the House, Dean Plocker. I appreciate it. It's not the easiest thing in the world to do, to come and sit here and take and answer questions about things. You know, here's the thing. You've heard some staffers that you could argue whether they have axe to grind. Again, we talked about this. I know Dana Radham and Miller. I've always thought she was a top professional. I kind of give you my thoughts on why she would feel the need to do this, and again, I don't know. She's not told me. I don't understand. There's a missing piece here that I'm not privy to or don't get, or there's a misunderstanding somewhere. I've never heard Dean Plocker be hard to work for. In fact, I've always heard kind of the opposite. He's pretty easy to work for. That's not always a compliment in Jeff City, to believe it or not. But now, looking as we kind of project forward in this, I look back on this, right? So, number one, I see nothing wrong with coming up with new software to contact constituents. When you're in the House, especially your first couple terms, there's not a lot to do. So taking care of your constituents is probably very high on your list and should stay high on your list. I do believe that if they had a different lobbyist representing them, I could probably think of three, that they probably would not have had this exact blowback by some of the House staff. Now, again, I can't say that for sure, but if I was a betting man, and now thanks to Kelton I am, I'd bet that. Now, did the Speaker push for it? Yeah, probably. It sounds like he did. Did he go too far? I don't know. I mean, what is too far? I mean, hell, Bob Griffin would have just bought the damn thing and turned in the receipt later. I'm not. The House is ran generally by a Speaker that has a lot of stroke, and the caucus follows. That's pretty much the tale of the post-term limit House. And the pre-term House, it was exactly that way. So I guess my gut tells me that maybe that's a disagreement that led to some other stuff. There was obviously some problems in this staff, whether they were Dean's problems, whether staff's problems, they weren't getting along. And I could tell you as a former staff guy, if you have a problem with the elected official, the person that leaves is not the elected official. It's like you can't, what's the old saying, Kelton? You can't fire the team, you fire the manager. So the staff usually is the one to go there. On this expense thing, I think the guy's, this is just my white trash opinion. I think the guy screwed up. I think he screwed up. I think when you're Speaker, you have the campaign count, you have all these other things going on. You have it, but it doesn't excuse you screwing up. So he screwed up. He's gonna, I guess, pay back. So essentially, to break it down, in case we were talking too fast there, he had a trip. He went somewhere, I think to Waikiki or something. Which it's one of those things that looks as bad as it can look. You got the valet parking there. It's not a good look. But the facts are, there's a conference about law, something about writing laws. I don't know. They said the Clean Missouri folks outlawed that, and I think it screwed that up. When they let you take these trips from like these different groups, they're educational. It's a bunch of technical crap. Don't get uppity if you're a liberal watching this. The Democrats do it too. And it's legal. But then there's a question of, did your campaign pay for it? Did the state pay for it? In this case, the state paid for it. Now, he bought his airplane ticket early, which is the smart thing to do, which is a very frugal Missouri thing to do. And somehow the rule said you couldn't do that, which is dumb. They should change the rule. But you find the problems in rules once you're using them. Missourians want to reward frugal people. So anyhow, that's kind of how this came up, was that he turned in the receipt with the trip, but the plane ticket was bought earlier. You should want to buy the early plane ticket, right? This is not rocket science. The earlier you buy the plane ticket, Casey's the expert on this. I just ask her. Earlier you buy the plane ticket, the cheaper it is. So you want Missourians to be frugal with your tax dollars. That's just a stupid rule that nobody intentionally did it. Just you find out through abiding by the rules what happens. Obviously, there's a problem with the House clerk and the House Speaker. Can they fix it? We'll see. Obviously, there was a problem with some of the staff. He made some changes there. Then, obviously, when they're leaking out stuff, they didn't pick the independent out of a hat. They knew what they were doing. I don't know who leaked what, or if it was leaked. I can tell you this. I've watched a lot of news. I've owned newspapers. I can tell you this. It's total bullshit to think that they were just randomly sending sunshine requests every 20 minutes to see if he'd done this. That's not real. Somebody in that administration wanted to make him look bad. And is that wrong? No. I get leaks all the time, but that's a fact. I also know, to check it out, that the person sending it to me has an axe to grind. Just common sense. So was it, I get the situation. You got a problem with your boss, so you leak to the press. I'm not here to complain about that, obviously. Now, on this expense thing, I saw Representative Maisie Boyd, a freshman from Northwest Missouri, said, and also, here's the thing, Dean funded her primary opponent. Is that influencing her decision? You decide. I'll just assume no, but it's something you have to take into account. The speaker has enemies. Do I think that the IP thing's possible? Maybe. I'm not convinced that that's that. I'd be more convinced that Representative Boyd might still be a little ticked that he funded her primary opponent than the IP thing, but it's possible. I mean, the fact is, the same people that fund the independent fund these initiative petitions that are very liberal. Some of them just actually, some of them aren't that liberal. They're just not supported by the Republican caucus. They're just, common sense and liberal and conservative are in the eye of the person watching or the eye of the person voting. So I guess, to me, is that possible? Sure. With this expense thing, did he screw up? Yeah, got screwed up. Is it like DEFCON 5 awful? Not to me. I mean, he should fix it. He should apologize. He should move on. I'm very interested to see how other people, I know for a fact there's been 3 other people that have had not exactly, but similar things they've had to go back and fix. Should they resign? I don't think so. I don't think it gets there to me. He screwed up. He's got a leg on his face. So you wipe it off. I liked how he went and said, hey, this is my bad. He owned it. I would bet you he has in for a stern rebuke from Miss Rebecca when he got home. I wouldn't want to screw up and go home and see Rebecca. She's tough, let me tell you. But to me, I think it's one of those deals where, is this going to impact some people giving to the lieutenant governor race? I think, let's talk about impact here, right? The House Ethics Committee, this is fishy, right? I'm not saying you can't do this. I know Dana Rademan. I don't think she's going to do things this is out of character for her. So there's a reason she's doing it. I'm not going to assume it's petty or I don't know what it is. I think she has earned the right to explain what it is through her time of service to the state. This is odd, right? It could be there's something we don't know that is so odd. It could be that there's some internal stuff that's maybe a little blown out of proportion. That's sort of where my gut takes me. But I don't think, looking at this email, I didn't know the clerk could go to the ethics committee to get advisory. I didn't know you could do that. Now, maybe you can. I've never heard of that. I've got to go have a beer with Randy Shear. He could probably tell me 5 times it's happened. But I didn't know you could do that. One, it makes this House Ethics Committee look real weird. There is weird. That's something very strange happening tomorrow. If I was on that committee, I would text Scott and say, hey, I'm going to try to get that. You know what I mean? And there's folks that'll say there's an out of control bureaucrat there. There's folks that'll say, I've known her for a long time. This is out of character. I would want this email, and I would want to know how this works. If I'm on the House Ethics Committee, I may have opinions I want to give about other stuff, right? If I can go have a hearing and do this, I think if I'm Marlene Terry, I want to go, well, I've got some other opinions for you, bud. You don't, here we go. Maybe that's how this works. I've never seen it work this way. I'm excited to talk to my old chief historian friend, Randy Shear, and ask him, does this ever happen before? Is this what goes down? And maybe he's going to say it is. I've never seen it, but that doesn't mean I probably drink too much and don't have a good enough memory, but I've never seen this. So I don't think the hearing was called for the expense thing. Now, if I got my old Mike Deering cattleman conspiracy hat on, my buddy Mike Deering can sometimes have a conspiracy or two. I might surmise that hypothetically, the hearing was called because it's out of session. It's a little tough, and then maybe this other thing was leaked out after the hearing was kind of in motion, in order to change the hearing agenda from can we still pay a former employee? What is the clerk's rights and duties here? What can't you do? To let's talk about this. If I were a conspiracy theorist, if I had my Deering hat on, I might think that. I think it's going to be interesting to see what those committee members are allow themselves to be. What role does the committee members allow themselves to play in this? Do they say, okay, this hearing is about this, and I'm not even sure. It'll be interesting to me if the committee thinks they offer these opinions. If they can, I think they're going to get many, many more. If you're saying the House Ethics Committee is now the arbiter of some of these internal questions, to me, and maybe it's not, but to me, that's a change in how things are done in the House. And if you do this one, strap in, buddy. You are going to get all kinds of Kelton may want an extra vacation paid. You may be hearing that before long. Please don't give it to him. It's a small operation here. He's winning gambling money. He doesn't need the money. But seriously, it'll be interesting to see. Again, I think it's a change in the role of the House Ethics Committee, or it's just something they haven't done before they're going to do now. Then if they change and they say, okay, we're not only going to talk, we're talking about expenses. I think, my gut tells me every person running in a Senate primary right now is now going to go look at their other opponents. I'll bet House Accounts has a handful of sunshine requests from different political consultants by about, I'd say now, to go and you're going to go through and nitpick every one. And, hey, fine. Again, let's talk real. Dean messed up. He should have had his accounts in order. He didn't. He's fixing it. Is it? I mean, it's up to the House of Representatives to say, okay, is that mistake bad enough he can't be in office? And maybe 82 of them say yes, maybe 82. I don't know. It would seem to be a high price to me for that, but I'm not an elected official. The people of the state of Missouri are wise enough to never entrust me with any government authority. So the people that they have, that's up to them. So going forward, how does this matter? It's going to matter tomorrow. The impact on this is going to be a few. And this is my own Stein of knowledge. Let me pull from the old Stein of knowledge here one more time. And thank you again, Chip. You are from St. Louis, not just like St. Louis. You're from St. Louis. Deal with it. If you're from Wentzville to, I don't want to say Festus. I like people in Festus. If you're from Wentzville to Arnold, you're from St. Louis. Just deal with it. I love you, buddy. Thank you for this time, but you just are. Impact is this, in my opinion. A, the House Ethics Committee either are going to pick up powers I have not seen them use. And again, maybe they have. Maybe this is a very common thing. I just don't know about it. The House Ethics Committee is going to pick up powers they didn't have before and use them, which is going to fundamentally change the House Ethics Committee, who's on it, what they do. From my perspective, maybe they've been doing this the whole time and I'm just a hayseed and I had too many Bud Lights and I don't know. But the House Ethics Committee is going to fundamentally change the course of the House Ethics Committee tomorrow. Or they're not. And this whole controversy is probably going to go away with Dean Plocker and maybe a dozen other folks checking their expense reports and making sure they're totally correct, which would be a good thing. I mean, that's a good thing here. Nothing wrong with that. Look, these are not tons. You don't have enough money in the House to be able to do much, but you should get it right. You know what I mean? And there's no excuse for not getting it right. That's get it right, man. That's not too much to ask. If it's too much to ask, then just pay for the trip yourself, right? So you'll see the House Ethics Committee either kind of say, okay, this is bad, but this isn't what we do. They'll say we don't do this, or we do. It's going to change the Ethics Committee. It's going to change a lot of things in how the machinations of the House work. Lots of folks are going to go review their reports, and if they don't review them, their future Senate primary opponents are already reviewing them, which is a good thing. The House Ethics Committee could be good, could be bad. It's like, what's that quote in Charlie Wilson's War? What did Confucius say? We'll see. We'll see if it's good for the House Ethics Committee to assert themselves in such a large manner. Then number 3, do I think it's going to be harder for Dean Plocker to raise money for lieutenant governor? Yeah, in the short term, I think that's probably right. The truth is, it's a big advantage to be speaker running for statewide office. And oddly enough, the 2 speakers I'm thinking of, Kelton didn't win. Gall ran for Secretary of State and lost. Then Catherine ran as speaker for Secretary of State and lost. I don't think we've had another speaker run for statewide office. Ron Richard won a Senate seat that I don't even think anybody filed against him. He's Ron Richard, by God. He's Ron Richard, by God. Nobody ran against him in Joplin, or as he would call it, Jobland. And he wasn't going to lose anyway, but he raised a lot of money. He wanted to be in the Senate, but for the most part, the speaker's kind of been their last job. And if they've ran statewide, they've been unsuccessful. However, you do have a honey hole period of after session of your first year and before session starts again in January to raise money. I would say this is going to make it a little harder for him to raise money for the next few weeks. So this either blows over or doesn't blow over. And so that's an advantage to Holly Rader. I think Bob Onder already smelled blood and is jumping in. The interesting part, Lincoln Huff's been discussed for this a few times. I know Lincoln well. I don't know his thoughts on it, but my assumption is if you took, I think knowing Lincoln, this is an assumption that he might be a little more, you might see the competitive streak rise to run against Bob more so than Dean. I don't know his plans whatsoever. I couldn't speak for him because I don't know, but it might be the case that Lincoln Huff might get that little crazed look at his eye that, and he might be more enticed to run for statewide office against Senator Onder. And Senator Onder might get that same look in his eye about a race that Lincoln was in. What's that old Michael Jackson gif of meat and popcorn watching? It'd be interesting. I would say that probably, Bob Onder getting in today benefits Holly Rader if Dean Plocker stays in, which I have no reason to think he won't. He certainly said he's going to stay as speaker. So my gut tells me that it's going to slow his fundraising down a little bit for the month of November, which is a big month for him. Don't undersell that. Once session starts, a lot of your corporate folks don't give during session. And then after session, you really can't do anything for them. So, and you could chop it however you want. We talk real on here. It's going to take away an important month of his fundraising for his lieutenant governor's effort. I think that's real. Bob Onder getting in, I think, hurts Dean Plocker. You have another guy from the St. Louis area, helps Holly. If Dean were to step aside, I think Lincoln Huff probably does have to go take another drive in the truck and check on the cows and talk to the boys and obviously get permission from Pat to run. And I think he takes another look at it. I think Dean could run now, but I think, when the dynamic changes from the Speaker of the House running versus a sitting senator who's a very talented politician in Holly Rader, and that dynamic shifts, and you've at least kicked the tires on it, you look at it again. So sum it up, because I know we got to appreciate everybody watching. Appreciate the Speaker for making time. Number 1, the House Ethics Committee is going to make a decision that's going to have a way bigger impact than did Dean Plocker screw up his books. If they choose to get a lawyer to go deeper, that could change the dynamic of a lot of things. But it is a very important precedent-setting hearing, as I understand it, and it may not be. But I noticed the line in here about, the House rules apply. Then there's always that clause that the U.S. House rules apply if it's something doesn't fit in the Missouri House rules. So you don't really employ that sentence in the U.S. House rules unless it's an odd situation or unless you're trying to maybe squeeze that square peg into that round hole. So that's an interesting part of that email. What ends up happening going forward on that? Well, it'll be a big impact on the House. Number 2, I do think the race for lieutenant governor is going to be impacted, not to Dean Plocker's favor, frankly. I think Bob Onder getting in hurts him more than Holly, just my opinion. And maybe that's some of this stuff's not a coincidence in that regard. I think Dean Plocker said he's staying in the race, staying as speaker. That is, I assume he's staying lieutenant governor. I think he'd say if he wasn't, but the fact he's staying, I mean, if you're a House member and you look, these House members do stuff out of their own self-interest, just the same reason you're watching this from work or the same reason you get up and do whatever you do. That's the truth. So in my opinion, I think there's a big deal for there's a big part for that lieutenant governor race to shake up. We'll see what happens. I think that race, whatever it is up in the air. I think if Dean Plocker meant what he said, he's staying as speaker. That's which I have no reason to think he didn't. He was pretty forceful. Kelton, you heard him. What do you think? Is he staying as speaker?
Sure, sounds like it.
What he sounded like. So you're gonna see a lot of House members. This is exactly how base this will be. It's their bill on something no one cares about getting referred to the right committee. That will impact their decision as much as anything else. And if he's staying and he's forceful and they believe it, then I think he'll stay. Last piece of news, Kelton, Mizzou's off. Are you going to take Mizzou against Georgia? Now, let me ask you this. What number would you not take Mizzou versus Georgia?
I'm not sure, but it would have to be, this might be the lowest one yet.
What spread? If it's Mizzou -7, do you take Mizzou still?
Absolutely.
Oh, God. At Georgia, between the hedges, you're making me look like an asshole. Kelton, I don't know if our illegal gambling thing can continue. Let's talk about the Supreme Court. I actually took Millie over to watch. She didn't want to go back to school. We had to go to school. We had an appointment. So then we go. I was like, I'll show you. But if you think math class is boring, I'll show you boring. Took her over to the Supreme Court. She watched. We got to watch Judge Sarah Castle. God, that she is just a ball of fire. My God, she's impressive. I mean, keep an eye out for her. She's legit. I mean, that gal, she's accomplished. She's just got a personality. I don't know what she's going to do, but I don't think that commission, she's going to be on a panel for the Court of Appeals at some point. I mean, she's just, man, she just kind of fire, just listening to her, kind of fires up. And she's a judge. My God. So I watched Judge Gardner, watched Judge Gooch. I was there for part of Torbinski's. I'll just tell you, another time, this commission, say what you will. I know there's been some controversy around it, inside controversy. This is my opinion. I am not a lawyer. I break more laws than I follow. I'm in court usually for nefarious reasons, so I am not a legal expert. But a Republican governor could pick Ginger Gooch, could pick Michael Gardner, could pick John Torbinski, and feel good about it, just like last time. The same two, the added Torbinski. I'm going to tell you that Torbinski's a star. I don't know what he ends up doing. Whether he goes, it's like Judge Castle. I don't know if she's on the Supreme Court. I don't know if she gets on the appellate court. I would say probably appellate court's usually the way this commission sort of wanted to go. That's the tradition. I've seen this particular judicial commission go. Sarah Castle's going to be a big deal someday. Just write that down. And if she's a big deal in Jackson County, now write it down. John Torbinski is going to be a big deal. He's going to be on the Supreme Court or the Federal Court of Appeal or Federal Court. That guy's impressive. He's got it together. He had a great clerk there for a while too. Anyhow, I wouldn't have picked Broniak last time. Bit of a surprise. I really thought it was going to go to Gardner. This time, I don't know. You tell me. We'll see. It's the old sheriff surprised a few folks, which he's known to do. He may surprise a few folks again. But we're going to surprise you by wrapping up here. Thanks to the speaker. Thanks everybody watching. Sunday, this week in Missouri Politics, we will have the pro tem and a candidate for Secretary of State, Caleb Browden, the Mizzou Tiger himself, will be here. All Mark Ellinger, Sharon Jones. We have a lot of fun Sunday for This Week in Missouri Politics.